Good morning. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Press, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.net. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We're going to resume where we left off, just backing up a paragraph for continuity purposes this morning. The first full paragraph on page 343 in the book, if you're following along. Again, the title of the book is The Footprints of the Jesuits by R.W. Thompson. And yesterday at the end of the broadcast, R.W. Thompson informs us that the papacy summoned all Roman Catholics around the world and reminded them of their religious duty to mount up and to help restore the temporal power of the Pope, not just in Italy, but all over the world. He literally summoned a global Roman Catholic militia in every nation of the world that, as a matter of religious duty, if they were true Roman Catholics, and they viewed the papacy as the literal replacement of the Son of God on earth, the throne of God on earth, that they were morally bound to help reestablish the Pope's temporal power in Italy and in their own countries. And R.W. Thompson continues now on the beginning of the last full paragraph on page 343. He says, this instruction is comprehensive enough to include all, both priests and laymen. It has the merit of simplicity, requiring only obedience to the Pope, the full assent of mind and will to all the doctrines he shall announce, and rejection of all opinions in opposition to them, no matter if their submission shall involve disobedience to the constitutions and laws under which they may live. In other words, even if you must disobey the constitutions and laws of your own government, in whatever nation you live, if you are a devout Roman Catholic, it is your moral, religious, faith duty to restore the temporal power of the Pope. And Pope Leo XIII descends so low as to give particulars and prescribes a course of conduct for all his subordinates. Now, who are his subordinates? Everybody. Remember, if you occupy the so-called throne of God Almighty on the earth, everyone is your subordinate. He says he descends also to particulars and describes a course of conduct for all his subordinates, like a commanding general laying down the plan of a military campaign. They must obtain the control of education. This global militia of Roman Catholics must obey the details of these instructions. And first of all, they must obtain control of education. So this militia that the Pope excited, Pope Leo XIII excited in this country and around the world, instructed them first, in order to restore the temporal power of the Pope, eventually, they must get control of education, so as to, quote, scatter the seeds of heavenly doctrine broadcast. In other words, to promote Roman Catholic teaching in all systems of education around the world, in order to save, quote, the young especially. So where you will find the greatest Roman Catholic influence in education is in the earliest years of education. Primary and secondary schools, daycares, okay? If you want to look for Roman Catholic influence in the education system, begin at the very beginning of the education system. And he says, to save the young especially, from the deadly influences of state and public schools where, according to his teaching, the method of education clouds their intellect and corrupts their morals. So at this time, obviously, our school systems were teaching the tenets of our popular government. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, freedom of the press, and that the people were the governors. And as governors, they elect their own representatives in government to pass laws protecting these rights. The Pope says this is heresy. And since the school system was teaching those forms of education and those tenets that arose out of the Protestant Reformation, this heresy must be taken control of through education. And it says they are required to instruct their pupils, quote, in conformity with the Catholic faith, especially as regards mental philosophy, as taught by Thomas Aquinas, you know, the great angelic doctor of the Roman Catholic Church, one of the most diabolical teachers, regarded as a father in the Roman Catholic Church. Anytime you get a chance to read anything about the philosophies of Thomas Aquinas, please avail yourself of the opportunity and find out exactly what I'm talking about. That man never knew who Jesus Christ was. And he simply, you know, the Roman Catholic Church calls him the angelic doctor. Well, angelic, if you equate him with the archangel that was cast out of heaven, okay, Satan himself. He says they are required to instruct their pupils, quote, in conformity with the Catholic faith. In other words, every Roman Catholic is to seek to become a teacher or an authority within the schools so that the Roman Catholic faith can be taught. And he says, especially as regards mental philosophy, as taught by Thomas Aquinas and other teachers of quote-unquote Christian wisdom, they are to make exterminating war. Remember, this is Pope Leo XIII giving specific instructions to this global Roman Catholic militia that he has summoned to restore his temporal power in every nation of the world. He says they are to make exterminating war upon the quote-unquote impious laws which allow civil marriages, because those thus united, if you're united in a civil marriage, you have desecrated the holy dignity of marriage, have lived in legal concubinage instead of Christian matrimony. That's right. They are to so get control of education and the government, the lawmaking bodies of this country, as to overturn it completely, even so far as to take away from the civil government the power to wed, because, as I said before on the broadcast yesterday, just before the end of the program, matrimony, according to the papacy, is a sacrament. And as the replacement of the Son of God on earth, only the Pope can marry someone or one of his delegated priests in a Roman Catholic church, in a Roman Catholic ceremony, under Roman Catholic priestly authority. Otherwise, you're not married. If you go to the Justice of the Peace, or you have a marriage ceremony in a non-Roman Catholic church by a non-Roman Catholic priest, you're not married at all. You're just living in filthy concubinage. Your wife's not your wife. She's your concubine. Now, if this isn't the pot calling the kettle black, what Pope didn't have hordes of concubines? These celibate, infallible popes. Why? they were forbidden to marry. A doctrine of demons. But they couldn't sequester their natural human instincts, so they had concubines. And they say they didn't commit any sin. Clearly in violation of God's holy law. But yet the Pope, claiming himself to be God on earth, says that if you're not married in my church by one of my priests, if your marriage is not sanctioned and consecrated by the Roman Catholic Church, you're living in filthy concubinage. And it stands to reason that if you're living in filthy concubinage with the woman that you simply call your wife, your children are bastards. Okay? And this is what drove Roman Catholics to get control of education, to take the teaching authority away from the parents and put it on the schools that were to be taken over by this Roman Catholic militia around the world. He said, and lastly, and no less imperatively, all are to be instructed in the indispensable obligation, quote, to obey their superiors, unquote. And who are the superiors in the world? Why, of course, the Pope and his priests. Now, but Pope Leo XIII has not been content with these distinct avowals of his pontifical opinions and purposes. He has chosen to give emphasis to them in other official methods. After the death of Cardinal Franchi, his Secretary of State, he appointed Cardinal Nina to that place. Whether he considered the latter not sufficiently instructed with regard to his opinions, or availed himself of the occasion to express anew and more explicitly the principles of his pontifical policy, there's no means of deciding. But whether the one or the other, he addressed to him an official communication wherein these principles were made known with perfect distinctness. Still contemplating the very serious peril of society from the ever-increasing disorders which confront us on every side, he said, obviously, with reference to the Protestant Reformation and this global rebellion that was taking place in even Roman Catholic countries at that time, not counting just the Protestant nations, but Roman Catholic nations abandoning the temporal power of the Pope, separating church and state, forming their own governments, instructing their own children, all outside the authority of the temporal and spiritual power of the Pope. He says, still contemplating this very serious peril of society from the ever-increasing disorders which confront us on every side, and the intellectual and moral decay which sickens society, he said, in consequence of its having thrown off allegiance to the temporal power of the Pope, he arraigns as prominent among the existing evils the separation of church and state. Precisely that condition of things which exists in the United States more distinctly than anywhere else in the world. So R.W. Thompson is telling you that this imperative that he's putting down to every Roman Catholic in the world is nowhere more significant than the imperative that it lays down to Roman Catholics in this country. The epitome of what the papacy would call rebellion. Separating church and state, allowing Protestant churches and Protestants to occupy the government, allowing Protestants to occupy places of teaching authority in the churches, and on and on and on. The Protestant Reformation is the target of literally every indictment that the Pope lays down. And when he is writing and speaking, this author, R.W. Thompson, realizes that he is speaking to no one more so than the United States of America. He says, upon this subject, which involves so much that it is absolutely fundamental in free popular government, he says, quote, the chief reason of this great moral ruin was the openly acclaimed separation and the attempted apostasy of the society of our day from Christ and his church, which means the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church, right? Which alone has all the power to repair all the evils of society. Only the Roman Catholic Church has the power. Only the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church has the power to repair all these evils that came out of the Protestant Reformation. And he says, and referring to the manner in which the Pope had been, quote unquote, despoiled of his temporal power, that is, he had his temporal power robbed from him, he admonished him, quote, to consider that the Catholics in the different states can never feel at rest till their supreme pontiff, the superior teacher of their faith, the moderator of their consciences, is in the full enjoyment of a true liberty and a real independence, unquote. That is, that Roman Catholics everywhere are expected to contribute immediate and active aid in bringing about the restoration of the temporal power of the Pope, so that, quote, the progress made by heresy, that is, the progress made by the Protestant Reformation, may be arrested and, quote, heterodox temples and schools, unquote, shall be destroyed. All right? Heterodox, that is, Protestant temples and schools, shall be destroyed. And let me just suggest to you that what is referred to here when he uses the word temples is literally a reference to Congress. Sometime on Inquisition Update, I'll make this point more clear. But in the Pope's mind, every institution of law, and I'm speaking specifically of Congress, is an extension of the church. Now, if it's not consistent with the Roman Catholic Church, it's still a temple of the church, but it is in rebellion, under Protestant control and influence. So this temple that you see on Capitol Hill is viewed by the Pope as a temple of the Roman Catholic Church. And it's in apostate hands, according to him. It's in Protestant hands, and it is up to Roman Catholics in this country, without exposing their cover and exciting the fears of Protestants in this country, are to gradually, slowly, but surely, ever so surely, take control of that temple of worship in Washington, D.C. And that's what they've been doing for centuries in this country, almost since its founding. Now, there's nothing at all in this. Now, listen, this is going to blow your mind if you're comprehending what we've been saying here on Inquisition Update. R.W. Thompson. Poor R.W. Thompson. He says there is nothing in all of this or in anything officially done by Pope Leo. Let me correct myself. Antichrist Pope Leo XIII. However earnestly it may be rejected by liberal minds, that should detract in the least degree from the estimate in which he deserves to be held by all who appreciate upright conduct and the consistent observance of Christian virtue. Oh, jeez. Oh, I hate to get down in the ditches with R.W. Thompson, but look. He's speaking of Antichrist here. The biblical, historical, and prophetic Antichrist. Here again, as he did with Pope Pius IX. He lauds the personal integrity of Pope Leo XIII. Never mind that he has just simply called the entire Roman Catholic populations of the world to unite in a global militia to make the Pope the tyrant of the world. He says there's nothing in all of this or in anything officially done by Pope Leo XIII, however earnestly it may be rejected by Protestant minds, that should detract in the least degree from the estimate in which he deserves to be held by all who appreciate upright conduct and consistent observance of Christian virtue. That makes you want to gag. The problem with R.W. Thompson is he doesn't understand what Protestantism is. Protestantism recognizes and denounces the entire institution of the Vatican, Pope and priest, Antichrist, the woman seated upon the scarlet-colored beast in Revelation chapter 13, that is destined for judgment, God's judgment. Now, what good does it do R.W. Thompson or anybody else to recognize any personal positive qualities of an entirely satanic organization? R.W. Thompson does not understand what Protestantism is. He may be opposed to the temporal power of the Pope, but he obviously doesn't have anything wrong. He doesn't see anything wrong with this Pope trying to do what Roman Catholic canon law demands that he do. Restore the temporal power of the Pope all over the world, despite the will of the people. The people who have been liberated by Christ. For all the value, for all the importance, for all of the critical importance of the information that R.W. Thompson gives in this book, enlightening us as to who the enemy is of Protestantism and our Protestant form of government, our Constitution, and all of our institutions in this country, R.W. Thompson still regards the papacy and the Roman Catholic Church to be a Christian society. He doesn't regard it to be Antichrist. Now, I've previously accused R.W. Thompson of possibly being a Roman Catholic here. But there's one thing about it. He is not Protestant. He doesn't protest Antichrist. He doesn't even know who Antichrist is. He just thinks the papacy have made a grievous error through the pseudo-Isidorian decretals and the forged documents that form the basis of the temporal power of the Pope. He says it's all been an error. The popes really are not temporal kings in the world, but they're still representatives of Jesus Christ on the earth. This is outrageous. It's outrageous, and I hope my listeners are not deceived by this. It's just incomprehensible that R.W. Thompson could be so knowledgeable about the errors of the Roman Catholic Church and still regard it a Christian institution. Nonetheless, we'll continue to glean the meat from the reading of this book when we get back. You're listening to Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio, and we'll be right back.
100 days, 100 subscribers at $7 will bring FirstAmendmentRadio.com to the minimum level necessary to sustain it through 2015. Go to support.FirstAmendmentRadio.com. $7 a month. Really, you can afford that for our Protestant First Amendment rights and the gospel of the kingdom message. Where your heart is, there will your treasure be also. Go to support.FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on Internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the Internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
In this day of economic uncertainty and soaring unemployment, safe investments are often hard to find. But investing in the precious metals is the safest investment of all, because gold and silver is real money. Government-printed currency is not. Call Melody Cedarstrom at Discount Gold and Silver Trading Company at 1-800-375-4188. Melody has been helping people secure their financial future for over 10 years. While others in the business claim honesty, Melody will deliver. Give her a call, 1-800-375-4188. That's 800-375-4188.
Visit crosstheborder.org, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, the rapture will be canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Welcome back from the break. You're listening to the second half hour of Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. I would really love to stay on Inquisition Update and First Amendment Radio, and to do so, I ask my listeners to support the sponsor of this program. Nicholas pays all the bills for Inquisition Update. He values this information. He doesn't charge me a dime to do this. I couldn't afford it if he did. He sees the value of this information and wants God's people to hear it. So he pays for it. Now, Nicholas doesn't drive a Mercedes, okay? I think he's got a pony, and he borrows a car. Nicholas is poor as a church mouse. Yet, out of what people donate to his ministry, he pays for the airtime for Inquisition Update, simply acknowledging the value of the information. Please help support Nicholas, will you? Just send whatever you can afford. Nickels, dimes, and quarters count heavily in the kingdom of Christ. Now, before I continue with this poor R.W. Thompson, I want to do something that I've never done before here on Inquisition Update. I want to appeal to my listeners about a personality in the alternative media that I have just become acquainted with somewhat. Her name is Karen Hudes, H-U-D-E-S. Karen Hudes was a chief legal counsel and whistleblower for the World Bank. Now, for any of my listeners who don't know, the World Bank is the supreme Vatican bank in the world, okay? It's just as corrupt as the Vatican Bank within the Vatican. You know, that will never disclose its books, that launders money for criminal and war operations around the world, always in trouble, always the source of scandal. Well, the World Bank's just the public version of it. And Karen Hudes was way up in this World Bank, and she is exposing not only the corruption of it, but the cover-up of that corruption. And get this, Karen Hudes, the chief legal counsel for the World Bank, says the Jesuits control it. And she's going to discover it, expose it, and fight against it. And she has already made conference with the governors of the states of this country and apprised them of the Jesuit control of not only the World Bank, but Citibank, the Federal Reserve Bank, and the entire economic, financial corruption that is ongoing around the world. And apparently she's waking up a lot of people. I want my listeners to go to Google Videos and type in the name Karen Hudes, K-A-R-E-N-H-U-D-E-S, and watch her videos and see if you can find out if this woman's for real. As best I can tell, over 4 or 5 videos that I've watched of her, she's either been listening to Inquisition Update or she's been reading the same books that I've been reading. And she's convinced. She's seen it herself by looking at the balance sheets of these banks, by looking at who sits on the board of directors of these banks, and she is irrevocably convinced that the Jesuits and the Roman Catholic Church are the principal controllers of the most powerful banks in the world. They control the economies of the world through these banks. It's the Jesuits and the Roman Catholic Church. Now, these warriors that Pope Leo XIII summoned with his plea to Roman Catholics around the world to form militias to take control of the governments and of the schools in the nations in order to teach Roman Catholic doctrine, which will naturally revive the papacy, reconstruct the papacy, and give back the temporal power to the Pope. These same militias, these Roman Catholics around the world, as a matter of religious faith, have indeed organized and have, as we stated, taken over the schools in this country, and Capitol Hill have also taken over the banks. And they've enslaved us all through debt. She is obviously doing her homework. Now, I'm trying to find a little hitch in her get-along, because I don't want to get too optimistic about what this woman is doing, because I realize that the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, the papacy, won't be destroyed until Christ returns. Now, Judas makes it the statement that we're going to win. She says, we're going to win. They are in violation of the law. But what Karen Judas doesn't remember is that in Roman Catholic canon law, the papacy is the supreme lawgiver, and he is not subject to the law of nations or any law, and he may change the law or annul the law and make it of no effect and do as he pleases. According to Roman Catholic canon law, there is no questioning the Pope. He is immune from legal reprisals. He is not subject to any power on earth. And if these corrupt bankers at the World Bank and the Federal Reserve Bank and Citibank and all the big banks are following the dictates of the papacy without disclosing it to their shareholders and stock buyers, doesn't matter. No civil court assembled can question what the papacy does. I hope Karen Judas knows this and is prepared to withstand this opposition. But it's high time that the whole world, not just Karen Judas and the people that she's working with, but all of us little people, the clay that the iron tramples on every day, that we should stand up and demand our liberty in Christ. Look, the banks issue us fiat currency, and I'm going to explain why. A currency that is not backed by anything of value. And the answer is simple: why we are given currency that has absolutely no value at all. Because God owns the world and everything that is in it. The Creator owns His creation. And Christ, His only begotten Son, is His heir. And when Christ gave up His life a ransom for us, He made us joint heirs with Him. So what does that leave the Pope? Absolutely nothing. The Pope has no worth at all. He owns nothing. He has just deceived the whole world that he owns something. And he represents this nothingness with fiat currency. And we all believe that should be the exchange currency of the world, when in fact we have been redeemed. And we're not supposed to have anything to do with that system, that phony system, because all the Pope's supposed wealth was gained by fraud. You see, it's beginning to occur to me that it wasn't just sin that Christ dealt with when He died for us and balanced the balance sheet on the sin account, but He balanced the balance sheet on the economic account too. And the Pope has deceived the whole world into thinking that he is the table from which every human being should eat, when in fact he has nothing whatsoever in the world, that he can claim as his to give to anybody, because God said, the earth is mine and the fullness thereof. The Pope calls himself the replacement of the Son of God on earth, and he's done a magnificent job of counterfeiting him, so much so that we're using the Pope's fiat currency. Karen Hudis has exposed the fact that our currency is based in nothing because it is derived from nothing, and it is derived from the Pope. I want my listeners to listen to Karen Hudis, let me get her name correctly, Karen Hudis, H-U-D-E-S. And it appears this woman is getting a lot of traction in the alternative media. Many people are beginning to laud her efforts. And I've witnessed in the faces of those who interview her a light switching on, just as it did mine after some thorough meditation last night on this subject. Karen Hudis, look her up, watch her videos, and would you please, after making some assessments, after thoroughly investigating Karen Hudis, write me and tell me what you think. Tom@seawaves.us. That's Tom@SEAWAVES. I want to see how resourceful my listeners are. I want to see how carefully they're listening and how serious they are about researching this Vatican Jesuit-led New World Order. Take a look at Karen Hudis and tell me what you think of her. Email me, Tom@seawaves.us. Now here, R.W. Thompson is having a lapse of his gray matter. I won't belabor the point. I think I did a pretty good job of belaboring the point before the end of the first half. But he says, R.W. Thompson, he says, there's nothing in all of this or in anything officially done by Antichrist Pope Leo XIII, howsoever earnestly it may be rejected by Protestant minds, that should detract in the least degree from the estimate of which he deserves to be held by all who appreciate upright conduct and the consistent observance of Christian value. The biblical, historical, and prophetic Antichrist that has deceived the whole world has robbed our heritage in Christ, both spiritual and earthly, he attributes with Christian virtue. Unbelievable lapse of understanding. He says, for these his life has been eminently distinguished, and when its end shall have been reached, fears of which are expressed at the time of the words of this writing, he will well deserve a lofty niche in the papal mausoleum among the greatest of the best of the pontiffs. Wrong, R.W. Thompson. Hear the judgment of the great whore in Revelation chapter 17. Hear the words God uttered immediately after Lucifer, Satan, said that he would exalt his throne above the stars of God and be like the Most High, said, yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. This man that you are attributing Christian virtue is the Antichrist, and his home will be perdition. Just as soon as Christ returns, the papacy's home will be the pit, right along with the false prophet who deceived him, Lucifer himself, Satan. And I don't want any of my listeners to be deceived by this unwarranted platitude by R.W. Thompson, who should know better. I laud R.W. Thompson for the wisdom of his understanding in the papacy's grievous oppression of the world through his temporal power. But I concede nothing to R.W. Thompson for his ignorance in recognizing that the papacy is the Antichrist of the Bible. It is, was, and always will be the Antichrist of the Bible. One thing is certain. We can question whether R.W. Thompson was a Catholic till the cows come home, but there is one thing that is evident. He was not Protestant. With that caveat, I will continue to glean the rest of the meat from the bones of this book, because it is highly instructive, highly important for God's people today. He says, if Leo XIII's opinions and utterances were to be estimated alone by his personal integrity and private virtues, the force of any criticisms of them would be materially lessened. But they belong to and are an essential part of the papal system which he represents, and is bound by the necessities of his position to maintain against everything in conflict with it. So R.W. Thompson continues to laud the biblical, historical, and prophetic Antichrist for just doing what he's supposed to do. Gag me with a spoon. He says, what he has said and so frequently repeated is echoed back from the tombs of those of his predecessors who fought their battles with liberalism, that is Protestantism, and progress, that too is Protestantism, when the forces which defended them were weak and the papacy was strong. That's right. The papacy was strong and tread all over God's clay, to the tunes of hundreds of millions. Inquisitions, crusades, tortures, rape, pillage, theft. He damned whole nations of Protestants. That's what the papacy did when the papacy was strong. But when God's people, Protestants who protested Antichrist, dared to question the authority of the papacy, he had no more power. The people just walked away from him, left him to stamp and stutter and fulminate and curse God alone in the Vatican, and that's where he ought to be today. And people with the understanding and intellect of someone like R.W. Thompson should damn well recognize where he belongs, and not to be lauded even for his personal attractiveness. He says he could not break a single thread in the net which encompasses him, howsoever anxiously he might desire it, and is consequently constrained to carry on the battle waged by his diabolical Antichrist predecessors until final victory is won, or the flag of the temporal power of the Pope is sunk out of sight forever. You know, that temporal flag of the Pope, it's not going to sink out of sight forever. It's going to burn! His task grows harder and harder every day. For now the progressive forces, the Protestant forces, are growing stronger, while the powers of the papacy, lessened by the loss of the temporal sovereignty, are steadily waning away. He is struggling against the patriotic sentiments of mankind, like a strong man battling with the waves of a tempestuous sea. Although the light of modern progress, although the light of Protestantism, the light of Christ, is not permitted to penetrate the walls of the Vatican, and he is shut in behind impenetrable screens, especially to keep it out, he ought nevertheless to know that those to whose prosperity and advancement it has contributed are willing to acquiesce in its extinction, or to sit silently by when it is attempted, whilst his arraignment of civil institutions which have grown up within the circle of this light may be well attributed to the papal system he officially represents. He has expressed his desire for their overthrow in such terms of censure and rebuke as to excite the suspicion that he is moved by an uncompromising and unconciliatory spirit. That's right, he is the spirit of Antichrist, the spirit of Satan himself. He says, whatsoever he has shown of this may rightfully be assigned to his Jesuit training and education. Bingo. Now R.W. Thompson's right on track. He says, having been placed under the care that of that scheming and insinuating society, the Jesuit order, the Society of Jesus, before his opinions were matured and whilst his youthful mind was unable to detect their sophistry or their cunning, they were enabled to mold him to their purposes, as the softened wax is impressed by any seal. Any intelligent investigation of his pontifical policy, insofar as it involves the relations of the papacy to existing civil governments, will demonstrate this to all whose faculties have not been dwarfed by the same system of education and guardianship. We see every day in the natural world conclusive proof that, quote, as the twig is bent, so the tree is inclined, unquote. So R.W. Thompson concludes that it was the Jesuits who molded the adolescent mind of this Pope. They were his educators. Nearly from the cradle, he was raised in Jesuit institutions, having been orphaned. And Pope Leo XIII was just putting into practice his Jesuitical teaching. And now you know why they want so badly to get control of the education systems around the world, and what kind of people they will produce, having gained access to the minds of the young around the world. The restoration of the temporal power of the Pope, that's the whole entire goal of this militia of the Pope, the Jesuit order. And the papacy, Pope Leo XIII, excited in the minds of every Roman Catholic to have the same mind as the Jesuits, to have the same mind that he had, that was given to him by the Jesuits from the earliest days of his life. That's why this country is being destroyed. This militia that the Pope created, Pope Leo XIII, inciting Catholics to take control of the government, has been fulfilled in this country. And Protestantism doesn't even raise a protest. And somebody take a look at Karen Hughes and tell me what you think. Karen Hughes. Take a look at her videos on Google. Write me and tell me what you think. Tom@seawaves.us. I'll see you tomorrow.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.